My daughter-in-law from my son's second marriage stormed into our lives with 6 children from 3 previous marriages, only to later drag us to court, demanding that we distribute our inheritance equally among all grandchildren, including hers. But when the final ruling came down, and the court determined that they owed us compensation for the emotional distress they caused, they suddenly decided it was all just a big misunderstanding. I'm a 65-year-old woman, and my husband, Robert, is 68. We've always taken pride in being a tight-knit, loving family. Together, we raised 3 children: Mark, 42, Emily, 39, and Josh, 35, instilling in them the values of hard work, integrity, and unwavering family support. After years of careful financial planning, disciplined saving, and making sacrifices, we were able to build a modest nest egg. Our intention had always been to pass it down to our children and grandchildren, ensuring their future security. But what unfolded recently was something we never expected. Mark, our eldest, had been married to Laura for a decade, and together they had 2 wonderful children, Amy and Ben. Even after their amicable divorce, we remained close to Laura. She was not only a fantastic mother to our grandchildren, but also a respectful and kind ex-daughter-in-law. I had always considered her like a daughter, so it brought me great comfort that even after the divorce, she remained a part of our lives. Mark was always a devoted father, and we admired the way he and Laura put their children's well-being above all else. 3 years ago, Mark met Sarah, 38, a colleague at work. Their whirlwind romance caught us off guard, but Mark seemed happy, and that was all that mattered to us. Sarah had been married 3 times before and had 6 children from her previous marriages, ranging in age from 4 to 16. We knew it would be a huge adjustment for Mark, but we hoped he had found the happiness he deserved. As always, we welcomed Sarah and her children with open arms, embracing them as part of our family. Our philosophy had always been the more, the merrier, so we made sure they were included in every family gathering, holiday celebration, and special occasion. Robert and I enjoyed taking our grandkids to Disneyland, and it was even more fun with Sarah's kids tagging along. We even helped Mark and Sarah financially when they needed a larger home to accommodate their growing blended family. We had always believed in supporting our children, and we saw this as another act of love, one that would bring our family closer together and ensure a comfortable environment for Mark, Sarah, and their children. But as time passed, we started to notice a shift in Sarah's behavior. At first, it was subtle. She showed an unusual interest in our financial situation, asking casual questions about our retirement plans and future expenses. We assumed she was simply concerned about our well-being. However, her curiosity soon became more pointed. She started making passive-aggressive comments about fairness and how all the grandchildren should be treated equally in our will. Robert and I did our best to explain that while we cared deeply for her children, our resources were not unlimited. Our original plan had always been to leave our savings to our biological grandchildren. We had already extended our financial support in many ways, but our inheritance was something we had carefully structured with our direct family in mind. Unfortunately, these conversations never ended well. Sensing the tension, we began avoiding the topic altogether. Little did we know, Sarah had other plans, and we were about to find ourselves in the middle of an unexpected legal battle. Things took a turn for the worse when we decided to update our will. Wanting to be transparent, we called a family meeting, inviting Mark, Sarah, and our other 2 children, Emily and Joshua. Since this directly involved Mark's children, we also wanted Laura, his ex-wife, to be present. However, Laura gracefully declined, mentioning that Sarah might not be comfortable seeing her husband's ex-wife at a family gathering. We respected her decision. After all, not everyone is thrilled about their spouse's past relationships, and that was understandable. At the meeting, we laid out our plans, explaining that our estate would be divided equally among our 3 children. Additionally, we had set aside specific funds to support the education and future of our biological grandchildren, Mark's 2 children, along with Emily's and Josh's kids. Everyone seemed satisfied, and Emily, our daughter, even reassured us that she didn't need anything from us, but we insisted it was our responsibility as parents. Then Sarah spoke up. She asked, "By Mark's kids, you mean all 8 of them, right?" I had anticipated this question and calmly explained that, as much as we wished we could provide for everyone, our priority remained our biological children and grandchildren. Our financial resources weren't limitless, and we had planned this inheritance carefully for years. Sarah's reaction was immediate and explosive. She accused us of favoritism and outright discrimination, claiming we were punishing her children for circumstances beyond their control. She insisted that since she had married Mark, her children were now part of the family and deserved equal treatment. Mark tried to de-escalate the situation, but it was clear he was caught in the middle, torn between his new wife's expectations and his understanding of our perspective. The conversation spiraled downward, ending with Sarah storming out in anger, while Mark rushed after her, trying to calm her down. But that was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, the tension in the family grew unbearable. Sarah's attitude shifted from disappointment to outright hostility. She started spreading rumors within the family, painting us as greedy and unfair. She twisted our words, telling others that we had outright rejected her children and refused to see them as family. Worst of all, she began telling her kids that we didn't consider them part of our lives, creating a toxic environment that began straining our relationships, not just with Mark, but with our other children as well. Hoping to find a solution, we suggested that Mark and Sarah make separate financial arrangements for her children. We even offered to help them set up savings accounts for the kids, ensuring their future security. But Sarah wasn't interested in compromise. She insisted that every single grandchild, biological or not, should receive an equal share of our estate. Then, just when we thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One evening, we were stunned to receive a court summons. Sarah had taken legal action against us, demanding that her children be included in our inheritance. She accused us of deliberately excluding them, claiming that our decision was causing them emotional distress and creating an unfair and hostile family dynamic. We were devastated. Never in our lives did we imagine that our own daughter-in-law would go to such extreme lengths, dragging us into a courtroom over what should have been our private financial decisions. The legal battle that followed was a nightmare. It drained us emotionally, financially, and mentally. Sarah's legal team argued that since her children were now part of the family, they had the right to be treated as equal heirs. They painted us as cold, outdated, and discriminatory, making it seem as though we were heartless people refusing to accept our son's blended family. The entire ordeal was humiliating and exhausting. Robert and I had spent decades working hard, planning, and saving so that we could leave something meaningful behind for our children and grandchildren. And now, instead of enjoying our golden years in peace, we found ourselves entangled in a bitter courtroom fight, forced to defend what should have never been questioned in the first place. Never in our wildest dreams did we think we'd be fighting our own daughter-in-law in court, over our own money. To make matters even worse, the lawsuit caused a deep divide within our extended family. Some relatives, particularly those who had only heard Sarah's version of events, sided with her, believing we were being exclusionary and unfair. She spread false stories about how we supposedly treated her children poorly, claiming we ignored them at family gatherings, isolated them from activities, and even made them sit separately from the other grandkids. None of it was true. From the moment Sarah and her children became part of our lives, we treated them as family. We included them in vacations, holiday celebrations, and every family event. In fact, we had gone out of our way to make them feel welcome. But Sarah's narrative was so convincing that if I had heard it from someone else, I might have believed we were truly awful people. So I didn't blame the friends and family members who took her side. They were simply misled. Others, including our children Emily and Josh, stood firmly by us, insisting that we had the right to decide how to distribute our assets. But the damage had already been done. Family gatherings became battlegrounds, thick with tension. What was once a warm and loving family environment turned into something unrecognizable. Despite everything, we still tried to maintain a relationship with our grandchildren, including Sarah's kids. We wanted them to know we loved them, no matter what. But it was clear Sarah had poisoned their perception of us. She would cancel planned visits at the last minute, making flimsy excuses. When we did manage to see them, she would find ways to make us seem unfair, accusing us in front of them of favoring Amy and Ben over her children. It was heartbreaking. As we fought this legal battle, our lawyer remained our pillar of strength. But at times, it felt like we were fighting a losing war. Sarah had crafted a compelling narrative, positioning herself as a victim of our supposed bias and financial favoritism. The court initially seemed sympathetic to her, and we feared the worst. Determined not to give up, our lawyer decided to dig deeper. She began looking into Sarah's past, reaching out to people who might have insight into her financial situation. One of Sarah's ex-husbands agreed to speak with her, and that conversation turned out to be the breakthrough we desperately needed. What started as a routine background check quickly unraveled a shocking truth. Sarah had always claimed she raised her 6 children entirely on her own, without a dime of financial support from her ex-husbands. She often painted herself as a struggling single mother, abandoned and left to fend for herself. We had believed her and even admired her strength, applauding her for single-handedly providing for such a large family. But it was all a lie. The truth was that Sarah had been receiving substantial child support payments from all 3 of her ex-husbands. In fact, one of them was still paying for 3 of her children. She had never mentioned this to anyone. Not to us, not to the rest of the family, and certainly not to the court. Instead, she had carefully curated the image of a financially desperate mother in need of our inheritance. When our lawyer uncovered the full extent of these payments, the total amount was staggering. She had been receiving more than enough to provide comfortably for her children, yet she had misled everyone into believing she was financially struggling. This revelation changed everything. Our lawyer gathered all the evidence, bank statements, court records, and financial documents, and presented them to the judge. The impact was immediate. The courtroom atmosphere shifted in an instant. The judge's demeanor hardened as they reviewed the evidence. Sarah, who had once appeared confident and self-righteous, suddenly looked uneasy. Her earlier claims of financial hardship crumbled under the weight of the facts. The judge began questioning her sharply, demanding explanations for why she had failed to disclose her true financial status. Sarah fumbled for words, scrambling to justify her actions. But the more she spoke, the more her lies unraveled. Her carefully constructed facade fell apart before our eyes. In the heat of the moment, Sarah's attempts to argue that the child support payments weren't enough completely fell apart. The judge's frustration with her dishonesty was evident, and any credibility she had left quickly crumbled. As the courtroom filled with whispers and shocked glances, the judge's final questions cut straight to the core of the issue, challenging Sarah's integrity and exposing her true intentions. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Sarah seemed at a loss for words. As the judge expressed his clear displeasure with her misleading claims, I couldn't help but glance at Mark. His face was a mixture of shock and devastation. I could tell this was unexpected news for him. The realization that he had defended his wife against his own family, only to learn she had been hiding critical information from him all along, must have been utterly heartbreaking. The betrayal in his eyes was unmistakable. In the end, the court ruled decisively in our favor. The judge upheld our right to distribute our estate as we saw fit, making it clear that Sarah had no legal claim to demand an inheritance for her children. Furthermore, she was ordered to compensate us for the emotional distress and legal fees we had incurred due to her baseless lawsuit. To top it all off, she was also charged with a penalty for concealing her financial assets from the court. The moment the verdict was read, the room fell into complete silence. Sarah's face turned ghostly white. Her confidence had evaporated. She wasn't the entitled, aggressive woman who had dragged us through months of legal battles anymore. She was simply exposed. Mark sat there, utterly defeated, staring blankly at the floor as if trying to process the weight of everything that had just happened. As we were leaving the courthouse, Sarah approached us. Her entire demeanor had shifted. Gone was the hostility, the entitlement, and the righteous indignation. Instead, she now carried an air of forced humility. She suddenly wanted to put this all behind us and move forward as a family. We should let go of all the misunderstandings, she said, her voice dripping with desperation. She had all the kids with her, including Amy and Ben, our biological grandchildren. She played the sympathy card, saying that Mark and the children wouldn't be able to handle the emotional distress if we chose to keep our distance. Robert and I were too stunned to respond. After everything she had put us through, months of legal battles, public humiliation, and broken family ties, she suddenly wanted to act as though none of it had happened? We simply walked away. Now we don't know what to do. While we feel vindicated by the court's decision, the damage to our family is undeniable. Our relationship with Mark is deeply strained, and we worry about the long-term consequences of this situation. We love our son, and we don't want to lose him, but Sarah's sudden change of heart feels completely insincere. So, AITA for standing our ground and refusing to include our son's new wife's children in our inheritance plans? Should we attempt to reconcile for the sake of family harmony, or is it best to stand firm given everything that has happened? Update 1. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone who offered advice, support, and kind words. Your comments helped us see things from different perspectives, and we truly appreciate the empathy and insight. A lot has happened over the past few days, and I wanted to share an update. The day after the court verdict, Mark called us. His voice sounded different, exhausted, worn out. But more than anything, there was something in his tone that I hadn't heard in a long time: regret. He asked if he could come over to talk. Alone, without Sarah. Robert and I agreed. No matter what had happened, Mark was still our son, and we knew this conversation was long overdue. That evening, when Mark arrived, the sight of him broke my heart. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His usually well-groomed appearance was completely disheveled, his eyes dark with exhaustion. He sat down on our couch, but before he could even speak, all the emotions he had been holding in seemed to collapse on him at once. He broke down, not just a few tears, but gut-wrenching, uncontrollable sobs. Robert and I just sat there, letting him get it all out. When Mark finally spoke, it was an outpouring of apologies, raw, unfiltered, and filled with regret. Through teary eyes, he admitted that he had failed us, failed to stand up to Sarah, failed to protect us from the chaos she caused, and, perhaps most painfully, failed himself by allowing things to spiral so far out of control. He confessed that Sarah had been pressuring him for months to convince us to change our will. She framed it as an issue of fairness, constantly telling him that her children deserved just as much as Amy and Ben. Whenever Mark tried to reason with her, explaining that our decision wasn't about fairness, but rather about our financial situation and personal wishes, Sarah doubled down. She became more insistent, even threatening to leave him if he didn't support her in the lawsuit. Mark admitted that he had felt trapped, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for us. Deep down, he had always known Sarah's demands were unreasonable, but he felt powerless to stop her. He was terrified of losing his marriage, and in his desperation, he let Sarah take control, even though he knew it was wrong. And now, with the court's decision, the full weight of it all had come crashing down on him. Sarah's pattern of manipulation. As Mark continued talking, a deeper, more troubling picture emerged. This wasn't the first time Sarah had caused financial disputes in her relationships. Mark revealed that throughout their marriage, he had started noticing a pattern. Sarah always seemed to be in conflict with someone over money. Whether it was her ex-husbands, their families, or even friends, there was always some kind of financial drama. When they first got together, Mark had dismissed these incidents, chalking them up to her difficult past and assuming she had simply been unlucky in her previous relationships. But now, after everything that had happened, he saw the truth. This was who she was all along. That realization hit him hard. We spent hours talking that night. Mark laid everything bare, his fears for the future, his regrets, and his guilt over how much pain this had caused our family. Robert and I listened without judgment. We told him that while we couldn't undo the past, we would always support him, no matter what decisions he made about his marriage. We urged him to consider counseling, both individually and as a couple, to help him work through the damage that Sarah had inflicted, not just on us, but on him as well. A call from an unexpected ally. The next morning, we received a call from Laura, Mark's first wife. She had heard about the court case from Amy and Ben, who were understandably upset by everything that had happened. Laura has always been a steady, kind presence in our lives, and her words were exactly what we needed to hear. She thanked us for always being fair and loving grandparents to Amy and Ben. She told us she was deeply saddened by what had transpired, especially since she knew firsthand how much we cared for our family. Laura also shared that she had spoken to Amy and Ben, reassuring them that they were loved and that this conflict didn't change anything about our relationship with them. Her kindness and understanding were a balm to our weary hearts. Sarah's next move. As for Sarah, we haven't heard from her directly since the courthouse. But through the family grapevine, we've learned that she's been spinning a new narrative, one in which she's the victim of our supposed cruelty. She's telling anyone who will listen that we mistreated her and her children, using the court's verdict as proof of our unfairness. Some relatives, particularly those who don't know the full story, have been swayed by her version of events. They see us as the villains, believing we were heartless for excluding Sarah's children and taking her to court. But thankfully, others see right through her. They recognize this for what it is, a desperate attempt to shift the blame and avoid taking responsibility for her own actions. At this point, Robert and I aren't sure where to go from here. We feel like we've won the battle, but at what cost? Our family has been torn apart, and while we're relieved that the truth has finally come to light, we can't help but wonder, can anything be salvaged from the wreckage? Finding a path forward. In the midst of everything, we've decided to focus on what matters most, healing our relationship with Mark and his family and maintaining strong bonds with all our grandchildren. The court's decision may have settled the legal matter, but the emotional wounds it left behind will take much longer to heal. To help us navigate this painful situation, we've decided to seek family counseling. We believe that having a neutral professional guide us through this will help us rebuild trust, open communication, and mend the relationships that have been damaged. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. There's still so much uncertainty about what the future holds, but one thing is certain, we refuse to let this conflict define us. We are determined to stay strong as a family and work toward a resolution that brings peace, not further division. I'll continue to keep you all updated as things unfold. And once again, thank you for your unwavering support. Update 2. A disturbing turn of events. Just when we thought the dust was finally settling, a new crisis emerged, one that has shaken us to our core. Yesterday morning, while Robert and I were babysitting Josh's kids, we received an unexpected and alarming visit from Child Protective Services, CPS. The moment I opened the door and saw the CPS worker standing there, my heart dropped. She introduced herself and stated that she was there to investigate an anonymous report alleging emotional abuse and neglect, not of Josh's kids, but of Sarah's children. That was all we needed to hear. It didn't take long for us to connect the dots and suspect who was behind this. The investigation. The CPS worker explained that they are required to investigate all reports of potential child abuse or neglect, regardless of whether they seem credible or not. She assured us that this was just a routine inquiry, but the implications were terrifying. To be falsely accused of something as serious and unforgivable as child abuse was beyond anything we could have imagined. The worker conducted a thorough investigation, speaking to each of us separately and then inspecting our home from top to bottom. She checked every room, every closet, every corner, taking notes as she went. Despite the initial shock and fear, Robert and I remained calm and cooperative. We explained everything, the court case, Sarah's lawsuit, and the ongoing conflict, and provided her with legal documents that detailed the court's ruling in our favor. CPS sees the truth. As the visit progressed, the CPS worker's initial formality softened. It became clear that she was beginning to see this for what it really was, a malicious, retaliatory attempt to weaponize CPS against us. After completing her assessment, she reassured us that, based on her initial findings, there was no evidence to support the allegations. Before leaving, she thanked us for our cooperation and promised to follow up with a written report in a few days. The aftermath. Even though we knew we had nothing to hide, the experience left us completely shaken. We've endured a lot over the past few months, but this felt like a new low. It's one thing to be dragged through the courts over money, but to be falsely accused of harming children? Children we had gone out of our way to welcome into our family? That was devastating. We don't have any proof that Sarah was the one behind this, but given everything that has happened, it's hard to believe it could be anyone else. And now, we're left wondering, how far is she willing to go? A breaking point. Later that afternoon, we received a frantic call from Mark. His voice was trembling as he spoke. He had just found out about the CPS visit, and he was absolutely horrified. Mark was in full-blown panic mode. He confirmed what we had already suspected. Sarah was behind the false report. According to Mark, when Sarah found out that he had visited us alone the other night, she exploded with rage. She accused him of betraying her, and in her fury, she threatened to make us pay for what she perceived as a personal attack on her and her children. Mark was distraught. He told us that Sarah had been spiraling ever since the court verdict, lashing out at him and the kids, refusing to move on, and clinging to her anger like a lifeline. Instead of accepting reality, she had been escalating the situation, trying to manipulate everyone around her. It was clear that Sarah wasn't just upset about losing the case. She was determined to maintain control, even if it meant destroying the family in the process. A difficult decision. Then, Mark revealed something that caught us completely off guard. He had been in contact with a divorce lawyer. This wasn't a decision he had made lightly, but after everything that had happened, the court case, Sarah's erratic behavior, and now the CPS incident, he realized that he couldn't stay in this toxic marriage any longer. Mark had spent months making excuses for Sarah, convincing himself that things would get better. But now he saw the truth. Sarah wasn't just hurting us, she was hurting him, his kids, and even her own children. The CPS visit was the final straw. He couldn't live in fear of what Sarah might do next. And he wouldn't allow her to keep using the children as pawns in her twisted game. Mark was especially worried about Amy and Ben, who had already suffered enough from the constant turmoil. And even though Sarah's children weren't biologically his, he felt a deep responsibility for their well-being too. He didn't want to see them caught in the crossfire of Sarah's manipulations any longer. We reassured him that we supported his decision 100%. We advised him to document everything, every threat, every argument, every sign of emotional abuse. He needed evidence, not just for the divorce but also to protect all of the children from any further harm. Taking precautions. As for us, we aren't taking any chances. We've installed security cameras around our property, just in case Sarah tries to escalate things even further. At this point, nothing seems off the table for her, and we have to be prepared. We're also being extremely careful about what we say and do, knowing that Sarah could twist anything and use it against us. The family remains divided over this entire mess. Some relatives still believe Sarah's sob story, that she's just a misunderstood woman trying to protect her kids. But others? They're finally seeing the truth. Sarah's actions have gone beyond reason. Her willingness to lie, manipulate, and even weaponize CPS has made it crystal clear that this was never about fairness. This was about control and power. And now, she's losing both. What happens next? Right now, our priority is Mark. He's made it clear that he wants out of this toxic marriage, but he's also struggling with the weight of what that means, especially for his stepchildren, who have already endured so much. Mark is a good man, and even though his own world is falling apart, he's trying to do the right thing for everyone involved. As for us, we're just trying to keep our heads above water. This entire ordeal has been emotionally draining, and we still don't know what Sarah will do next. But one thing is certain. We will not let Sarah tear this family apart. We will not back down, and we will not stop fighting to protect the people we love. I'll update you all again when we have more information. Thank you for your continued support and advice during this incredibly difficult time. A turning point. First and foremost, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who has supported us throughout this tumultuous ordeal. Your advice and encouragement have been a lifeline during what has felt like an endless storm. The past couple of weeks have been a whirlwind, full of revelations, betrayals, and tough decisions. But finally, we're starting to see some clarity. Mark's breaking point. A few days ago, Mark made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He moved out of the house he shared with Sarah. For now, he's staying with a close friend while he figures out his next steps. This decision wasn't made lightly, but after a series of shocking revelations about Sarah's manipulative behavior, Mark realized he couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. And what we learned next only confirmed that he made the right choice. Sarah's web of lies. Mark recently discovered that Sarah had been secretly contacting Laura, his ex-wife. What was she trying to do? She was spreading vicious lies, telling Laura that Mark had been drinking heavily and had become aggressive. She even suggested that Laura should keep Amy and Ben away from him for their safety. But here's where Sarah's plan backfired spectacularly. Laura saw right through the manipulation. Instead of believing Sarah's lies, Laura immediately informed Mark about what was happening. She knew exactly what Sarah was trying to do, drive a wedge between Mark and his children, isolating him further. Instead of falling for the deception, Laura has become one of Mark's biggest supporters. Her strength and clarity during this chaotic time have been invaluable, and we're deeply grateful for her unwavering support. The manipulation didn't stop there. Sarah wasn't content with just targeting Laura. She decided to widen her attack. She reached out to Emily and Josh, spinning another web of deceit. She told them that we didn't care about them or their children, and that, in the end, everything was going to be given to Mark. Where did she get this idea? Apparently, she had overheard a conversation between Mark and Robert at a family gathering. She twisted their words, turning an innocent discussion into a sinister plot, all to drive even more division in the family. But just like Laura, Emily and Josh saw right through her lies. They confronted Sarah directly, refusing to let her poison their relationships. And when Sarah realized that her manipulations were failing, She abruptly ended the call, a clear sign of her growing desperation. Enough was enough. This latest betrayal was the final straw for Mark. He has officially filed for divorce from Sarah. Not only that, he is seeking full custody of Amy and Ben. On top of that, Mark is working closely with his lawyer to address the false CPS report that Sarah filed. He now fully understands the lengths Sarah is willing to go to in order to manipulate and control those around her, and he's determined to put a stop to it. Sarah's desperate attempts to rebuild the bridge she burned. Now that her schemes have crumbled, Sarah has been desperately trying to reach out to us. She has left tearful voicemails, apologizing profusely for her actions. She is begging us to convince Mark to give her another chance, but we are not engaging. Instead, we are documenting everything. Every voicemail, every message, it's all being saved for potential legal use. At this point, we refuse to be manipulated any further. Sarah made her choices. Now, she has to face the consequences. Moving forward, this has been one of the most exhausting and emotionally draining experiences we've ever faced. But for the first time in a long time, we can finally see a way out. Mark is taking back control of his life. The truth is coming to light. And Sarah? Her web of lies is unraveling faster than she ever anticipated. We know there's still a long road ahead, but for the first time, we feel like we're winning this battle. I'll update you all again when we have more information. Thank you for your continued support. It means the world to us. Finding moments of healing amidst the chaos. In the midst of all this turmoil, we've been fortunate to spend some much-needed time with Amy and Ben. Sadly, Sarah's influence on them didn't stop at Mark. Now that they have some distance, they've started reflecting on past incidents, and what they recall is heartbreaking. Sarah often made them feel like outsiders in their own family. She would constantly compare Amy's achievements to her own daughters, subtly implying that Amy wasn't good enough. She even told them outright that they were too dependent on their father, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity in their young minds. Understandably, Amy and Ben are shaken by everything that has unfolded. But we've made one thing abundantly clear to them. They are loved. They are valued. And we will always be here for them. We are working closely with Mark to ensure that they have access to therapy and emotional support as they process and cope with the fallout of this ordeal. Their well-being is our top priority, and we will do whatever it takes to help them navigate this difficult chapter in their lives. What about Sarah's children? Despite everything, we still care deeply about Sarah's children. They've been part of our family for years, and none of this is their fault. The last thing we want is for them to feel abandoned or rejected because of their mother's actions. Mark feels the same way. He is actively exploring ways to maintain a relationship with them, possibly through supervised visitation, depending on how the divorce proceedings unfold. While the circumstances are far from ideal, we hope to continue being a positive presence in their lives, offering them the stability and kindness that they deserve. Rebuilding trust in the family. One silver lining in all of this? Our extended family is starting to come together again. Many of the relatives who had initially sided with Sarah are now reaching out to apologize, having finally seen the full extent of her deception. We're taking things one step at a time, cautiously rebuilding these relationships. Trust doesn't return overnight, but we're hopeful that, in time, we can restore the bonds that were nearly destroyed by all the lies and manipulation. A lesson learned and a new decision. Looking back, we stand by our decision regarding our will. But we now realize that our communication about it could have been clearer from the start. With everything that has happened, we've made a new decision. We've chosen to set up a small trust specifically for Sarah's children's education, separate from our main will. It won't be as substantial as what we've set aside for the others, but we hope it sends a clear message. Our issue was never with Sarah's children. We always cared about them, and we still do. Looking ahead, a future of healing and protection. Our main focus now is on healing as a family. We're continuing family counseling to help us navigate the complex emotions and dynamics that have surfaced throughout this ordeal. At the same time, we're taking proactive legal steps to protect ourselves from any further trouble Sarah might attempt to cause. As for Mark, he is making progress every day. The road ahead won't be easy, with the divorce and custody battles looming, but we are optimistic about his future. Above all, we are grateful for the strength of our family, grateful for the support we've received, and grateful that we are finally moving forward. I'll be sure to update you all as things continue to unfold. Thank you, truly, for standing by us through it all.